is Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang for a Friday in some month of some year. I know you love that. Is it the last day of February?
Maybe.
Yes.
And we have a momentous event, which I'm hoping that one of our gangsters will talk about, and that is Dan Farber. Welcome, Dan.
Good afternoon, Steve and everybody else. Wow, that's a big picture.
Yeah. The glory of iPads. Is that an iPad Mini or an iPad Maxi? Or
no, that's an iPad called an iPad Air. So I'm trying to figure out where to look, so I don't look like I'm looking to a camera, but it's
look over here.
To your left. To your left.
Yeah, right there.
To my left. All right.
Now you look like Stevie Wonder. You look like you're looking, but you're not looking.
I can see myself now.
So you had. Let me quickly just say hi to Keith Teare, who just piped up, and Kevin Marks. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi there. Nice to see you.
So this is a little low-key Gillmor Gang as we await Robert Scoble's return from the land of alcohol and whatever else goes on at South by Southwest, and John Toshek is in Barcelona, mopping up from the Mobile World Congress. So this is the team, and I wanted to toss it to Dan Farber. You had some news today.
Yes, I did. After 35 years or so, I've left the company, so to speak. So I'm no longer at CBS. I'm striking out on my own, or just to see what's out there. To continue to be on the frontier, but not working for CBS at this point.
So what do you think is? Obviously, this is a personal decision, but from your view of the industry, what does it speak to? Is there anything going on that you're excited about moving into, as opposed to, just reporting? Do you want to do as well?
Sure. I mean, I still did my regular routine this morning, which is wake up and check all my so-called wires to find out what's going on, see what's interesting, have some thoughts about it. And so at this point, rather than chase the news day to day, I, prefer to help out as a consultant, as a coach, companies, people, who are on the frontier, because I still want to be on the frontier. I still, want to be where the action is.
And what do you think the action is right now?
Well, the action is all mobile, social, cloud, wearable, Internet of everything. It's everything we know about, and where it's just pulsing, and so much activity. And I think it's an opportunity to come in and really continue what I've been doing, but in a more strategic way.
Dan, do you talk to Eric Schoenfeld at all offline? Have you noticed what he's doing with TouchCast?
I've seen TouchCast. That's his video platform. Yeah.
I think the reason I mention it is his motivation in doing TouchCast sounds I'm not convinced that's the right product, although I think it's interesting. But his motivation in doing it is quite similar to yours.
Well, I think it's an opportunity, as I said, to take all the experience I've had, what I've learned, and help others make fewer mistakes potentially, and provide some guidance. And also for me, it's a chance to learn new things as well.
So, Steve, are you okay if I talk about the Now.tv idea that's been in the back of my mind for a long time?
Well, why would I not be okay with it? I mean...
So you see this behind me, Dan, Now.tv? Yes. The reason it's there is it's a dream, and there's a chance it coalesces with your dream. I spent 2 years ago, I spent a long time looking at the impact of Twitter and Facebook and Skype on the meaning of a newsroom, which seems a weird thing for me to be interested in, but I was interested in it. And I went and bought this domain name. I think I paid like $5,000 for it or something, because it felt to me as if the word news was no longer a word young people identified with, but they still like news. They just don't call it news. What they like is kind of now, which is just another word for news. Or it can mean many things, but one of the things it can mean is another word for news. So I registered that name, and I started looking at the business models of the satellite-delivered and cable-delivered news services. In particular, CNN I drilled down into. And, it's astounding to discover that CNN makes most of its revenue from cable subscriptions and satellite subscriptions, but makes about $600 million a year from advertising to an audience that averages about 250,000 worldwide at any given moment, a simultaneous audience. So I started to think, what if you could build, on top of Twitter, Facebook, and Skype, what if you could build a newsroom with a live service, but not just a live service, that was able to become the central, let's say, curator of news and presenter and place where news is discussed, and deliver it mainly over mobile, via internet, without signing any deals at all with cable or satellite, which is, I think, what brought current TV down ultimately, because it was too boring and too like the other guys. And I think, I think the reason I got involved in helping Heather Hardy set up TechCrunch TV is to learn whether that was possible, both financially and practically. And I think the answer was yes and yes, it is possible. So that's been in the back of my mind for a long time. I've talked to Steve and Teare about it on occasion as well. And no one's really doing it. There isn't such a thing as a global news experience on the internet. And TV everywhere kind of compounds the problem, because it locks you into being a satellite or cable subscriber in order to see the signal.
Kevin Marks, you've been doing broadcasting out of Apple IIs back in the day. You have to unmute.
I said not quite that far back, but
well,
certainly.
I exaggerate, but I believe you were broadcasting BloggerCon 1 from Harvard
Yes.
through your Mac. And that, what year was that?
2003. Yeah.
Exactly. So please give us some perspective.
Well, the thing that I spent a chunk of time at Apple working on live broadcasting and getting that stuff up working so we do live broadcasting over the internet. And the thing that I realized when doing that was that in itself is not very interesting. What makes this work is when there's a back and forth and interaction with people watching.
Right.
And it's exactly what makes this show work is that we've got people who are talking to us in the chat room at the same time as we're doing it and giving us the feedback. So the feedback doesn't have to be two-way in that sense, though obviously the two-way between us is what makes this work. But having that ability, you need to have a reason to watch something live. And one of the big things that frustrates me a lot about the way video works at the moment on the net is that due to licensing things, they're streaming video over the net, even though it's pre-recorded. So the sensible thing will be to download it and play it locally, but instead they're buffering up very short amounts and clogging up the net with that. And that's a lot of the net neutrality fights with Netflix are over that, whereas Netflix is having to do it in this inefficient way because they're not allowed to let people download things. That's the way they found to do it. Whereas, and I wrote a post 6 years ago, something like that, saying live TV is dead, precisely because I thought that watching how they were wasting this ability to talk to everyone at once on replaying things like that. But I was proved wrong because of Twitter, because Twitter gave a reason to watch things in real time, because you can react to them with a set of other people that you've chosen to follow and enjoy them that way.
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
is enormously important in broadcasting now. It's the thing that has saved Twitter from irrelevance, because they've got every TV show to put hashtags and live tweets and things up on the screen.
There was
and that is And it's particularly something that's particularly interesting in the UK because everyone's on the same time zone and they still have a bit of a culture of watching, 4 TV channels instead of 100. So there's more live stuff going on. So often in what would be the evening in the UK, which is about this time of day here, you can sit down and watch. If you follow enough UK people, you can watch them sort of heckling the TV set together. And here that only tends to happen during a large event like the Oscars or something like that. But it will happen for a particular show with a subset of people that watch that show, and that gives an interactivity, a two-wayness that gives a reason for watching something live again.
So there was an interesting report today or yesterday about how they're able to measure, or they think that they're able to measure, House of Cards success this year based on the number of tweets. It's essentially double the number of tweets for season 1. And of course, Netflix does not reveal its usage.
Netflix can measure it because they can know how many people have actually watched it, but they don't care to release figures for it,
right?
Because they're not playing the Nielsen ratings game, which sort of makes the network's heads explode a bit, because House of Cards is it's very clear that lots of people have watched this series of House of Cards, and lots of people watched it in the first day, but it doesn't fit into the mental model of Nielsen ratings.
Well, I think
that, Steve, your example is indicative of a bigger point, which is, putting video on the internet isn't that astounding. Using the tools that we've got on the internet to create a new concept of news, and to Kevin's point, news is two-way, not one-way. That's kind of interesting. And whereas that has been done on text-heavy sites, it hasn't really been done for video. And the concept of a video player that isn't just a player, a two-way player, if you like, to me is the core of it. And what does that mean? So, like our player now, people watching this, they've got... Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
I was
Kevin.
just going to say, you're
Dan.
bringing up some interesting ideas, which is, what is the future of news? Or what is the future of video? And we're at a kind of transition period where everything is kind of separate and going its own way, following the kind of traditional models that we've had, with breaking up more on a business model front. But you could imagine a situation where, take Twitter, take real-time feeds of video from the Ukraine or someplace. People could be creating their own news channels in video, just like an extension of Hangouts, where I'm on Twitter, I have followers, and a bunch of my followers decide that they're going to join me to talk about the Ukraine, and I'm feeding in video from all these various sources in real time. So there could be infinite numbers of news channels, so to speak, and it would be similar to the environment we have for blogging, which is there are millions and millions of bloggers, and they're out there creating content, but then there's only a few, a minority where people actually pay attention to them on a larger scale.
So I think that's true, but I think some of that is already given to us by like Livestream and Ustream, that have perfectly good apps for broadcasting from a mobile phone anywhere in the world, as long as you've got a half decent, at least a good 3G signal. So I think we've already got the possibility of many news channels, or at least many live inbound streams. I'm intrigued by what does that mean for a newsroom and a curation, because I still think there's a role for editorial, and there's a role, and I don't think a live editorialized channel replaces the many channels. I think it may mainly be a showcase for the many channels, but it still has to be compelling and interactive.
I'm not sure that you haven't already stated the fundamental change, which is this interactivity of the audience. The audience becomes, like the chat room on the Gang has always been, it has a character of its own. It's almost like a living, breathing fifth or sixth person on the show.
How would you feel if you could very easily pull someone in for the chat room to actually be live with us on air? To me, that would be a good thing.
I don't know. I think that there's a certain aesthetic of what we're trying to do with this show, which is to develop an information base and context out of which not the people who are talking, but the people who are listening create some sort of synthesis of what we are talking about and what they find interesting, and they come to some conclusions, whether they verbalize them or not. That to me is the success of the environment. So I don't know. To me, it's like the voice recognition software. You think that it's going to do something for you, but what it ends up doing is to shift the context of what the problem is from incorrect spelling to incorrect context. You know, it hears and puts words on the screen that don't make any sense in the context of what's going on. You see this in some transcripts as well, where the transcriber doesn't really understand what the subject is, and you can kind of read what's going on by looking at the mistaken word and figuring out what they were trying to say. It's sort of reverse, and I think that the dynamic of making it more of a puzzle and becoming more of a detective as a viewer, as a sharer, whatever the social thing is, I think that's really the thing that needs to be embraced at all costs. I don't know. What do you think, Dan Farber? Do you think that I'm just completely crazy?
I don't think we know, and I think that's the fun of it right now. There are all these people experimenting, and that's really what's great about it right now, which is, the fact that you could bring someone into the show from anywhere, connected would be useful at some point. And the fact that you can, create a channel or content simply by assembling little bits of pieces and people with access to all kinds of content, that's a good thing. It's in the same way that we all used to say, well, look, all these blogs out there, what's going to happen? It's too much. But it turned out to be a great thing, and it just means more opportunity for great content to surface.
I mean, in a way, YouTube and Vimeo represent the library of content. It's amazing what's on there, but it's completely uncurated, and you've got to search and discover. You can subscribe to channels, but then you're not always interested in everything in a particular channel, so you need it to be more bite-sized. But if you could build on top of a YouTube, a Vimeo, a Facebook, a Twitter, a Skype, something that represents every channel you could possibly be interested in, which is completely doable. And YouTube aren't going to do it. They're really just the library. I think there's something very compelling there, myself.
This is what Andy Carvin's been doing for a while. I mean, he during the Arab Spring revolutions, he was sitting there on Twitter absorbing information from all kinds of different people and posting links to videos and saying, what's being said in this video, is this actually current, can you help me confirm whether this is right or not, and sort of doing that kind of iteration towards the truth in public. And he's joined what are they called, Omijar's new thing, to go and help them over there. So I'm interested to see what he comes up with in that environment. But the stuff that he did there was very much an early version of what you're talking about here. And the challenge is what you take from that. He was doing just on Twitter as a stream of conversation with links to the external videos. But that would obviously be a good way to construct a running order for something that potentially be submitted as video, created as video, and certainly work better than the tepid kind of supposed live video that we get out of CNN and everyone else who does it that way?
I think there is a sociological problem, which is I have two modes of watching video. One is when I'm on my own during the day, and the other is when the family's together. And the kids, of course, all atomize into their own little screens and do whatever they want. But when me and my wife sit down in the evening and watch something together, we have to choose something that we both want to watch because we want to actually enjoy it together, like House of Cards, for example. But during the day, when I'm really surfing video and it's coming into my peripheral vision, usually through Twitter or somewhere else, and I find something I need to listen to, then it's pretty much an individual experience. And when it's an individual experience, that's where curation is at the optimal. When it's a shared experience, it's much harder because any 2 or 3 or 4 people need to probably lean back and watch something passively that's their common taste, with the exception of kids, I think. So I don't think there's such a thing as just video. I think there's different modes of video, like lean back, lean forward, video as a supplement to the content you're interested in versus video as entertainment, shared or private.
There is the pattern of like playing videos to each other. That's a have you seen this one? Have you seen that one? And passing things back and forth that way. And that's certainly a YouTube usage pattern that I've seen lots of different people do. But I'm not quite sure how that plugs into news. It could to some extent. It could be say, have you seen this? Have you seen that? But the challenge is still you've got to edit it carefully and well, and make sure that the overall, as Tina was saying in the chat room, make sure the overall story you're telling is coherent. And whereas what happens with like CNN is that they have the little edited packages, and then they and with other TV news, in fact, they have the little edited packages, and then they have people talking complete drivel that purports to link it together but doesn't actually, and that's the piece that turns me off.
Yeah, well,
so the question is, can you replace the people who are talking drivel about the news with someone who's actually making a coherent story out of it, which is what Andy was doing on Twitter.
They're not all talking drivel, but there certainly is a lot of drivel. But I think what we're really talking about is the fact that there's a lot of content, there's a lot of news, there's people on the ground, there's people who can help filter things, but there's a real need for curators. And you have services like Circa, where they will, big news event, they'll just keep adding to it, checking out sources, kind of not necessarily doing original reporting, but taking the reporting that's out there and massaging it and turning it into something that's usable on a mobile device, but also as one place to go, as opposed to having to go to 10 different sites to get a good picture of what's going on for a particular event, almost in real time.
Mark Andreessen wrote a long, I don't know whether it was a post. It was on his site, and it didn't have comments, so I guess it wasn't a blog. But it was about the state of journalism. And one of the things that he said, I thought was, I thought the whole thing was very interesting, but he seemed to not understand, or here's me telling Mark Andreessen what he doesn't understand, which is like nothing that he doesn't understand. But I'm trying to tease out the idea here that the wisdom of a editorial agenda seems to be coming, at least in some of the early experiments with crowdsourcing and the like. What happens with Twitter, etc. The editorial focus is almost an organic thing, and I think that it's emerged. You saw it with the Boston bombing, for example, where Danny Sullivan basically took it upon himself to clean up the barrage of information, assign some sort of pattern to it or a map of who he thought were the more credible sources, and then retweet them, and then basically point people at various kinds of streams. Now, that may seem like curation, but I don't think it is. I think it's something completely new. It's the ability to, the old saw about how, and Andreessen talked about this in his post, about that corrections are, there's no what's the, Dan, you're an editor. What is the, or at least you were until today. What is the thing that you do when you a retraction or a change in terms
well,
of?
You make a correction, a retraction.
Yeah.
Yes. You amend history.
Andreessen's point is that you don't today. Everything's in real time, and news organizations have taken to just making the corrections, sometimes attributed and sometimes not, so that what's up there is the final source of truth, in quotes. I think he used quotes around truth. So I guess what I'm trying to tease out here is that what you don't get from that, that would seem to be more authoritative than trying to convince a news organization to retract something or to change something because it turns out that their reporting isn't that good. There's also the sense of it being pure somehow. But, what is the last thing that goes up? It's not just the stuff that was printed that was agreed to in terms of recitation of the facts. It's also what has gone through many layers of perspective, and sometimes I think it can be laundered of any real significance because it becomes sort of a combination of middle of the road statements that people are willing to accept without going too far. Keith, do you know what I'm saying here?
Well, you've inspired some thoughts in me. I think I know what you're saying, but the thought that I have is a lot to do with expertise and enthusiasm, finding each other. Back in the bulletin board days on CompuServe and AOL, you could go to a bulletin board that was about something as particular as, video overlays on a Commodore Amiga toaster. And the guy who built the toaster would be there, and everyone who used it would be there. And you could immediately be in a very productive conversation that would solve a problem in often seconds.
This, by the way, is the Amiga toaster on the PC. It's the same company.
I know. And then, that's why I used it as an example. and then Usenet came along and slightly diluted that because all kind of idiots got involved, but there were still Usenet groups, if you went deep enough in the hierarchy, that were very specific, and you would get the right people responding, usually delayed time because of the nature of Usenet. And what happened is as Web 2.0 came along, and the web itself and blogs, what happened is the experts got their own poles of attraction, and you had to go to them. And there was no kind of place to go for all the experts on a particular topic anymore. And it feels to me as if we're losing something because of that. It's as if the interesting things are now spread through the universe of media, words, pictures, videos, and the ability to quickly pull together the experts and the enthusiasts and the people who want to learn about anything in particular seems to be harder than it needs to be. And it feels to me like curation might be part of how you fix that.
But, curation of a free-for-all is it's an exercise in busy work. It doesn't really respond to the actual organic stuff that is going on. People still have to make
but why couldn't it?
It could,
Kevin,
but we're striving for it. It's not. The technology doesn't enable it. If anything, it makes it more difficult to actually reach it. People have to establish a sense of trust with the group, and vice versa. People have to, provide context to where they're coming from before people are going to be willing to accept random comments.
If Dave Weinberger was on this call, we'd start talking about whether hashtags and machine learning could reproduce a better version of Usenet for mobile with track. Because
there is no track. Track doesn't exist.
Exactly, it doesn't. But Kevin makes the point that what I'm asking for is Stack Overflow, and I think that's a pertinent point, or Quora for that matter. But I think they represent single attempts to solve it in particular disciplines. It feels to me like there's a new phrase that's starting to be coined, infrastructure as a service. Ron Palmieri's company Lair, in a way, is that, and the company that Sequoia just funded, Kahuna, is doing that with push notifications. Infrastructure as a service, it feels like there's a role there for the interest graph and the ability around the interest graph to have the experts and the enthusiasts coalesce almost on any topic, and for it to be a bottoms-up phenomenon. Like if I start a topic and no one else has started it, people will flock to it, and over time it will evolve into the place with the people for that topic.
Well, I think that's true.
I think part of this sort of nostalgia for the past. I was having a conversation about this at Homebrew Website Club on Wednesday with Brian Bellendorf and Tantec, and the thing is that we had these spaces that you could assume that everyone at them was university educated. That is what Usenet was like. It's what email was like originally, because you couldn't get an email address without being attached to a university, and then there was all of these, and even in the early days of Facebook, it was like that. There was the first set of people on Facebook were people who were currently at large universities in the US. So you start off with this pool of people that you can assume, in a sense, are worthy of being in the common room, and then you let everybody in, and then the challenge is the assumptions that you made no longer hold true. And I think the challenge of building these spaces is to balance that influx of people in a way that works well. And Twitter was very good at this for quite a long time. And it's only more recently that as they've been bringing in growth hackers and large swaths of people who forget what Twitter was like originally, that it's become a sort of a plague of notifications about things you don't care about, rather than the feed of comments from people that you had chosen to follow. And that's the challenge as these things grow, is maintaining that sense of that the people you're listening to are the people you want to listen to, and vice versa.
Well, this is an age-old humanity problem, which is it's for example, when you were in the kind of rural setting, there were the tribes, and those tribes were families or interest groups, or they had a lot of shared interests. As people move to the cities, as urbanization happens, it gets crowded, and it's harder to find those interest groups. On the other hand, there are more of them. There are more people. There's more opportunity, and we're in that phase right now where, take wine, something I care about sometimes. There are dozens and dozens of sites for wine lovers or wine haters. And they're all little sub-communities of the overall wine universe. And some of them are businesses, and some are just kind of social, but it's combining social and businesses. That's where the big win is.
There was an interesting report, just to bookend this, about how, and I'm not sure I believe it, but some poll, or I think it was a Pew Research, that indicated that of all the technologies that are now available to us, the one that would be easiest to let go of, the hardest would be the internet itself, but the easiest to let go would be social media. So there are all kinds of research reports. It's hard to know what to believe, but social media is taking off because it fills a need for people, and certainly people are overdosing on it, like they overdose on sugar at this point. But people will start to think more about nutrition, health, and start to use social networks, with a little more discretion. But whether it's news or video or whatever it is, it's about finding
interest groups, finding information that you can trust, being a part of those groups, participating, so it's not just one way, but two-way. And this is kind of what all this all of everything, this kind of tsunami that's going on right now, this is what we're in the middle of it. We're not at the end of it. And it's going to continue where these technologies and the growing ability for people across the planet to have a voice because of all these miniaturization and everybody having a computer in their pocket or on their head, it's going to create some fundamental changes in society, but it doesn't break down the fundamental needs of people to be in groups, where they share common interests. So as opposed to saying, well, there's so much information out there, people can be a lot smarter. No, they'll still be prejudiced because they still want to join the group that shares the same view that they do, and they think everybody else is wrong. So it's more social is not going to solve the problem in Ukraine, but it does provide more information. It's just kind of tools for each side to use to promote their causes. End of transmission.
Yeah, no, I'm just letting it sit there. I've been on a plane for 6 hours, so this is heaven for me. Just not hearing anything except intelligent people actually talking. As opposed to the people in the row opposite me on the flight. It'll be an exercise to the viewer as to what part of that they did not conform to.
I think you're in danger of being accused of intellectual elitism there, Steve.
Well,
some people are less fortunate than you.
Bring it on. Go ahead, Keith, you were going to say
I was going to say, do we want to talk about what's going on with Bitcoin and Mt. Gox? It may be a little bit boring, but...
well, not to Andreessen, he's going to lose like 300 million, right?
I don't know. I think Coinbase is in good shape. I actually went and bought 2 Bitcoins last week. I'd never done it before, and I wanted to understand the process. So I went and bought 2 Bitcoins on Coinbase, which is the company that I think it was Andreessen that funded Coinbase. And Coinbase sits above Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox is just one exchange. And just for those who don't know, in order to get a Bitcoin, you have to have something called a wallet, which is where it's stored. And you buy it from an exchange, which is where it's traded. And the wallet can be on your desktop or in the cloud. And Coinbase is basically a cloud-based wallet that holds it for you. It also lets you put money in from your Visa card or your bank account and use that to buy the Bitcoins. And if you sell a Bitcoin, it can put the money back in your bank account or your Visa card.
But what's the goal here? What nirvana are you looking for?
So I'm trying to understand this phrase that Andreessen keeps repeating, which is Bitcoin is to money what HTTP was to content. And I think I know one use case that I fully understand that makes total sense to me. And that is, if I want to buy something in China and I need to pay in Chinese RMB, and I'm sitting here with my bank account in dollars, Bitcoin gives me a way, without really paying very much in fees, to use my dollars, change them into Bitcoin, use the Bitcoin, change it into RMB, buy the thing, and take delivery. And I don't have to pay 2% or 3% in credit card fees or foreign exchange stuff in order to make that. So I don't lose money by buying globally.
All right, so let's throw this open. I'll just ask the question: you really think that the credit card companies are going to be pushed out of the toll taking position in this worldwide money situation? I doubt it.
I think. Well, I've been following this quite a lot. I think that some of the best writing about it's been Quinn Norton's stuff on Medium. But the thing, and I've been going to a lot of the Bitcoin meetups, and there is some cognitive dissonance in the community. So all the companies are saying, yes, this is a way to send money globally without transactions, and it's cheap and easy. And there's like 5 or 6 of them that are set up to do that. And some of them seem to have good APIs, things that work fairly well, like BitPay and so on. And then you talk to them and say, so how are you keeping your Bitcoin safe? And they say, well, you have to get a computer that's never been on the internet and make sure that your wallet's on that. And then you've got to print out the passphrase on paper and lock the paper in a safe. And that way you may be able to keep your Bitcoin safe. So
sounds like Penn and Teller.
Because Bitcoin is effectively a global ledger of who has which coin. And the wallet is an encrypted thing where if you have the password to that, you can move the money out again. It's anyone who has a lot of these Bitcoins is very vulnerable to attack. And that's pretty much what happened to Mt. Gox. They were hacked deeply in 2010, and they've been pretending to have Bitcoins they haven't ever since, apparently. That's been the version of it that I've derived from that. So that it is a great way to move money around, but as a way of holding money, it's kind of tricky. And that's the bit that's I'm watching with interest to see how this works out.
Dan?
Well, it's an open platform. It's incredibly disruptive. It's incredibly imaginative. And like many other technologies we've seen over the last 20, 30 years, it's probably something that is going to continue to evolve and disrupt the financial industry. But as Kevin was saying, they have some big problems to solve. It's not federally insured, for example, and it's easy for them to escape your hands. So those are some big things to do. But we've seen major transformations in other industries, and there's no reason why the financial industry should be an exception.
So Bitcoin is the Uber of the financial world?
Bitcoin or something like it, yes.
I mean, in a way...
But you're right, it sets up a world war.
Interesting thing is it might do the opposite, which is, I'm British, and if you don't know the history, go and look at... do a web search on the gold standard and Bretton Woods and look at the whole history of how long it took to wrest the pound from its role as the currency of world trade and replace it with the dollar. Basically 2 world wars in the middle. It's possible that a non-nationally denominated means of exchange and store of value could prevent the same happening as the US and China change roles in history from being world leader to second and being second to first, which probably happens sometime over the next 50 to 100 years or even sooner. So it's kind of interesting that it could actually play the role that gold standard played in I think it was the 30s, right, when the gold standard happened, if I remember rightly. I don't exactly remember when, but somebody in the chat can go and look it up and tell us. So I think there's something potentially human about Bitcoin, human as opposed to national, national currencies.
But it is going to be a long haul.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There are entrenched industries that skim trillions of dollars. And they are not, they either have, the way it has to work is they have to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, and Mt. Gox either stole or lost about $500 million real dollars by having 750,000, 750,000 Bitcoins, quote, stolen or lost. Without, by the way.
How do you lose something?
They weren't lost. Somebody has them now.
Somebody has them. Unless they just deleted the keys, but
they were relost.
I doubt that. But basically, the interesting thing is the Bitcoin didn't go down. It's pretty much back to where it was before that happened. So there's something resilient in the ecosystem that can not. Imagine if that percentage of the stock exchange suddenly was stolen. And what would happen to stocks and shares?
Yeah, that happened 3 years ago. The Republicans did that.
Yeah, I know that.
Okay. So
scumbags.
we don't have to imagine it. But I think what you're saying, or maybe you're not, but I would suggest that its resilience depends upon it being incomprehensible how it actually works.
Yeah, I think how it works. I know a bit more about how it works than I should, because I took the time to go and talk to the guys who are doing Ripple, which is another currency. And there are some flaws in how it works, but it isn't true that Mt. Gox occurred because of those flaws. But there are some flaws, and the biggest flaw of all is it is not a real-time transaction. There is a delay whilst all of the wallets around the world get synchronized to take into account new transactions. And it turns out that every wallet has to have every transaction. So ultimately, it's gigabytes of data, if it was world scale, that has to be sent to every point on every node. And that right now takes about 60 seconds. And it's going to only get worse. So there's a flaw in that, which prevents it from being used for example, stock trading, because you can't get real-time transactions.
That can be considered as an advantage, though. It's like having a Tobin tax built in. It means that it's much harder to do machine trading and speculation with it in that sense, because the transaction times have an integration time over them.
Yeah, I can see that. I just think it probably isn't necessary to get the level of certainty that one needs to do that fully distributed multiple versions of the transaction chain. I think there's probably ways to optimize that without needing that.
Well, you've succeeded in completely confusing me. So
yeah, sorry. That's
I used to be just mildly confused. Now I'm totally confused. So it's actually, it feels better.
Well, imagine if I spend $10 with Kevin. In a Bitcoin world, that transaction hasn't happened unless you, Steve, in your email, and Tina in hers, and Dan in his, acknowledge that the transaction happened. So a transaction is only truly happened when everyone knows about it, not just when the two parties know about it.
But that would tend to be a violation of individual rights, wouldn't it?
Well, it's meant to be a protection against fake transactions or things being inserted into the system from the outside that are not real. Probably Kevin can explain this better than me.
Yeah, the math is complicated, but it's not as complicated as the terms of service from the credit card companies.
Yeah. Good
point.
And another way of thinking about it that's helped me think about it is that it's like being paid in stock. If you have Bitcoin, it has a publicly tradable value, but it takes some time to buy and sell it and move it in and out of other currencies. And if you hold too much stuff in that, it may go up and it may go down. And in that worldview, people in the Valley are very used to being paid in stock, and have had that happening for 20, 30 years. And so you're used to understanding that as another form of, this may be worth more in the future, it may be worth less in the future, but you have an understanding about what may happen to it. And Bitcoin is a bit like that. So the other part of the sort of weirdness of the companies working in it is they're in effect all holding stock in this Bitcoin thing, because they end up holding quite a lot of it as part of their trading. And they will give you a faster transaction turnaround by them swallowing the exchange risk and the time to read and write and so on. So if you work with BitPay, they will make the transaction happen quickly, so you can set it up so that someone with Bitcoins can buy something from your site and you will get dollars quickly, and then BitPay will deal with the Bitcoin exchange rate over time. And that means that they are acting in a bank-like way, in that they are integrating a set of risks themselves with the assumption that it will average out over a lot of transactions. And the challenge is, if there are sudden shocks to the market, then that will affect a lot of these companies. But they're betting on the fact that the ramp up in Bitcoin means that their previous holdings will help them cover that. So it is odd to think about, and there is, I'm definitely seeing sort of weird wishful thinking of things in it. But another company that I saw last night at the Bitcoin event in San Francisco, and I'll try and get their name right, Coin Cove, I think it is. they are based in Mexico, and they want to make it easier for people who send remittances from the US to Mexico to translate that without paying what often is a 10% fee for the money transfer and exchange. In order to do that, they're setting up a way for people to buy and sell bitcoins at convenience stores in Mexico through the Mexican equivalent of 7-Eleven, so that they've got an infrastructure in place there, so they can then build the international transfer part of it, so that the foreign workers here who are sending money back can send it through this system. And again, they're not presuming that they would hold that these individuals would hold money in Bitcoin, but they would just use it as a transfer mechanism.
Okay, so can we relate this back to anything that we usually talk about, like mobile or notifications? Is there anything about this that I can, like a drowning man, grasp onto so that I have a context that illuminates some of this for me, or am I just screwed?
I think you're screwed because this is in a different domain.
Well, I feel better then.
Microsoft experimenting with free version of
Microsoft
Windows 8.1.
experimenting with a free version of Windows 8.1, says Tina. Any
Yeah, I
thoughts
saw
on
that. I saw that, yeah.
They've also unbundled the enterprise version of Office, I believe, or maybe Windows, from the software, the relationship buy, the corporate, you buy 10,000 licenses and I forget what it's called, but you get service and you get maintenance, updates, etc. And so evidently they're also experimenting with, going direct to the enterprise as a way of extending their strength in the enterprise and somehow linking up eventually with consumers. I don't understand that either. Dan, anything that you saw interesting in your...
No, the only thing I could contribute to that part of the conversation is there was an interview, can't remember who had it, but it was with John Thompson, who's the chairman of Microsoft, who was talking about how the new CEO has a challenge because there is no longer the Microsoft monopoly and the Windows monopoly in effect, and he needs to work on going forward from that. And I think this is kind of one thing that they're thinking about, which is trying to figure out ways to keep Windows in place in this mobile world. And I think anything they do to make Windows free on the desktop is like a little bit of a Trojan horse to move desktop into the mobile platforms as well. The kind of idea that if you're using it on your desktop, then you'll want to use it for your mobile personal life as well. Although I just don't think that works, because there are millions and millions of people who are using Windows at work but then have an Android or iPhone.
But this does indicate that they're starting to think out of the box, as it were.
Well, they have to, because as Steve Gillmor would say,
Office is dead.
Yes, Office is dead.
Right. Well, it's doing quite well for being dead. There was.
I think that all the thanks should go to you, because you motivated them, you spurred them into action.
No, it was Scoble. Scoble did it.
But I was listening to Benedict Evans, who's a really smart guy who's now at the Andreessen Horowitz firm. And he was talking about Google and Apple, and he was saying, they're very different and they're not mutually exclusive. Yes, they meet each other on the battlefield, but you have to really think about them in unique ways. Google is purely about feeding its vast machine learning engine. Doesn't really care about hardware that much. And Apple is all about making devices. And one way to tell that Google really cares about machine learning is that the fact they have all their apps or try to get all their apps on iOS. And then the question is, okay, what happens down the road? Well, if Apple has 800 or 900 million iOS users, that's a good BMW business. And if Android has 3.5 billion users, that's a good platform, and it just means that Google gets to continue extending its tentacles for its machine learning and for building those predictive applications. And Apple still has a great high margin business selling its hardware.
Yeah, he's talked quite a bit about this, and I think he's exactly right about it. And in an odd way, it kind of manifests itself as, because they have such radically different goals and success, that they both prop each other up and create a hegemony that is almost impossible for Microsoft to disrupt. But
there's a lot of dark matter out there, so it's hard to know where things go from here. We're kind of in a maturing...
What does dark matter mean? What does dark matter mean?
Unknown entities.
Unknown gravity that could pull things into black holes and make them disappear.
You really think that that there's a lot of confusion about the relative strength of those two companies?
I think in Google's case, they have incredible strength because they're making this very pervasive play to be the nervous system of the internet.
But I think, just to be a contrarian a little bit, and this is a little bit speculative as well, but Google, surely at some point, Google gets impacted by the number of web searches declining in absolute terms as mobile replaces desktop. And given that their revenue from mobile search is so small proportionately compared to the desktop, I am not convinced that user behavior on mobile supports a search advertising model anywhere near as much as the desktop web did.
I think that's right, but I think there's a case where at some point, if Google is running your life, they're going to they'll want to be paid like WhatsApp.
Yeah,
yes.
The thing about the sort of Internet of Things, the whole takedown that Google is doing, according to Benedict, at some point, what this is really about, at least as far as I can tell, is about being able to do things that nobody else can do.
Well, yes. then they shouldn't have let Apple get a head start in beacons, because the Internet of Things is going to be all about beacons.
But if these two companies basically...
But there's a different way to look at it. Beacons, and I think I can't remember, but I think this is from Benedict, but beacons is about delivery, and what Google is doing is about being predictive. They're very different things. One is you go into a store and it kind of knows who you are, and there's this communication that goes on between these virtual devices and with you in the middle. The other is you go into the store, it already knows. It already knows.
Well, that's where people don't know enough about beacons. I hesitate to say this, but I spent
Beacons are data. Beacons are data.
No, it's more than that. Beacons, you've got to think of beacons in a triangle. It's the cloud, the beacon, and your smartphone. And actually, the even more confusing, your smartphone is a beacon too. So you are knowable through a beacon on your phone to anyone listening, if you choose to let them know. You'll have some control over that. And so you know where you are, your phone knows where you are, the cloud can deliver data based on where you are from the owner, and you can, if you choose, tell the place you're in who you are. And that's a completely new triad that the beacon begins to form the glue that GPS and the phone alone couldn't do. And so the phone as beacon, which every phone going back to iPhone 4S and on Android to Jelly Bean 4.1, I think, can be a beacon. And a beacon, there's two kinds of beacons. There's one called a peripheral, which is just a broadcaster of numbers. The other one's called a central. It's a reader and a writer. Well, a smartphone is a beacon central. It can broadcast, but it can also write to the cloud. It creates a whole new set of software that we can't even imagine. Well, we can probably imagine right now, but I'll give you a use case. Let's say your car gets stolen and it's got a beacon in it. And let's say everyone driving on the freeway has their cell phone switched on as beacons through software. Basically, your stolen car is going to be seen every 10 milliseconds by the crowd. And suddenly things become possible that were never possible before. And I think Google may be behind Apple there.
Fascinating.
So Dan, are you going to
Yes.
venture into this world as a participant or as a observer, or both?
Oh, well, both. You have to kind of follow Heisenberg's principle.
Which one? The guy Breaking Bad? That Heisenberg?
Exactly.
That's what I thought.
I was wondering what that means.
Yes.
What, blow everything up? Seems to be his principle.
Kill everyone who stands in the way of survival.
Right.
Yeah. You can't really measure it.
Only the paranoid survive. Andy Grove.
Yes. I mean that's the model of humanity.
And you throw a little Zen in, and you've got something, right?
Yes.
Okay. I was accused the other day of not being committed to mindfulness. Yeah. By a noted analyst.
Well, that's to not be committed to mindfulness is a mindfulness of its own.
I thought so, but I thought I had it all worked out for minimal. I do it when I'm trying to fall asleep.
Well, if there were more mindfulness, there'd be less static in the air.
You mean technically, or just
Technically, and yes, I mean, for real.
Thunderclap Newman.
There's a huge amount of static in the air right now.
All right, let's go around the table and wrap this one up, starting with Kevin Marks.
I still think the Bitcoin stuff is fascinating, but it is also it's also in a very early state, and chaos will happen. I like things in an early state, so I'm finding it enjoyable to hang out with. But it's going to take a while before it settles down to something coherent that people can make sense of.
Keith.
I missed last week's show on WhatsApp, so I just want to put my 2 pennies worth in, which is I told you so. The address book on the phone is going to become the social network.
Yes, but you also wrote a post for TechCrunch to say I told you so as well.
I had to.
Well, this is what happens.
How would anyone know I said it?
Okay, and Dan Farber.
Keith's a very smart guy, and I agree with what Kevin was saying about Bitcoin, which is it's very early, and there's a huge number of smart people playing around with it. So generally, something moving forward goes out of there. It doesn't go backwards.
Yeah, I think its resilience is in its ability to survive failure.
Its resilience is in its ability to keep some really smart people entertained.
Yeah, but you can only have your TV set can only be so big. That doesn't really float the world economy. Entertaining billionaires.
No.
Okay.
I don't think it's. I think it's. This is the Lewis and Clark stage of the financial industry. They have just been commissioned to go explore the new uncharted world.
Excellent.
By the way, breaking news, Square has postponed its IPO plans indefinitely due to poor revenue traction.
Who?
Square.
Really? Interesting. Yeah. I saw less of them. I saw Less Square in New York on my brief trip there yesterday.
They say that they can't justify their $5 billion private market cap in a public market, so they have to wait, which is all about what we've talked about before on the show, which is growth capital piling in early and driving up valuations.
Dan, you said something?
No, I'm just saying that's very refreshing that they're just very straightforward about it.
Yeah. It is actually, yeah, I agree. Kudos to Square.
And they just bought a little company, an address book company.
Okay, special late breaking bulletin. I have more work for you. Who's going to be Best Picture?
Best Picture.
Yeah.
I've seen a few of them.
Keith?
I personally liked Wolf of Wall Street.
Really?
Yep.
I lived through the real deal, and it wasn't quite accurate enough.
It's true.
Okay. So that's your pick?
I don't know. I have no idea, but I'm going to pick it because I can remember that I watched it. I can't remember the names of all the other ones.
Dan? Best Picture?
Dallas Buyers Club.
Oh, that was good too.
Do you think this is your pick for what you'd like to see as Best Picture, or
Yes.
what will be?
No, it's my pick for what I'd like to see, but I'm not sure what will be. But I thought it, was the most authentic movie of the year.
Kevin?
I really like Gravity. I thought that was a great movie, but I have no idea what's going to win because it's all about like politics of who's voting for whom.
Yeah, I think it's between American Hustle and maybe Gravity. Gravity, I think, is coming on strong. The Steve McQueen film was an early leader, but I think it's fading.
I haven't seen two of them. I haven't seen Philomena, and I haven't seen Her. I haven't seen Captain Phillips, and I haven't seen Nebraska. So
Right.
I've only seen American Hustle.
You have seen two of
you're
them,
just
is what you...
I've only seen American Hustle, Gravity, Wolf of Wall Street, and Dallas Buyers Club. Those are the ones I've seen.
Well,
Our chat room Alex thinks it's going to be
Chat room Alex says
12 years of slave.
12 Years a Slave. Yeah, it might be. I don't think it's the year for Hollywood congratulating itself with picking a deep movie. I think that the box office potential of American Hustle or Gravity is going to outweigh that kind of a pick, but could be wrong. There are some incredible performances in American Hustle. There's so many good actors in that film that it kind of overwhelms this. You get the sense that it's not a film as much as a sort of a farm for great acting, but I think it might win.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thanks to Newtek and the incredibly versatile and mysterious TriCaster that we are now having the pleasure of using. It's the grown-up toaster, and believe me, I think we still have a couple of toasters in the attic here, except we don't have an attic, but it was in the other house, in the attic. The toaster is an amazing phenomenon, and I think that it represents the sort of cusp between, what Apple is doing now and what Microsoft is going to have to do in order to save itself, which is, come up with some sort of disruptive hardware that they can sell equally to the enterprise as well as the gamers. And I think it's there are rumors that they're going to sell off, what is the name of that machine?
Xbox.
Yeah, the Xbox. So, who knows? I want to thank Salesforce.com for its support for this show. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. Thank you.
I have a mic, but you don't have it.
Here, go ahead.
I now have a mic.
No, you don't.
I don't.
No, I think the battery's dead. We'll have to work on it. We're getting there. I want to thank Dan Farber. Welcome back or to this brave new world. It's exciting that you're going to be on the front lines again. You were off in New York so long that I figured that you'd completely forgotten about technology, but it appears that you were just slumming in the real, so-called real news, and it's great to see you back. I want to well, thank you for doing the show too. I want to thank Keith Teare, as always.
You're welcome. And by the way, Tina's camera is awesome. The quality of her picture is great.
Yeah, I wonder where we got it. Some guy dropped them off.
Is it one of those? It's actually pretty good.
I don't know what the quid pro quo is.
Maybe I want it back. It's too good.
No, you should get one of those robot-controlled ones. Drone cameras is the next big thing, yeah.
Then I'd have to be looking up the whole time to see where the camera was.
Yeah, look out the window in the bathroom, and there's one. Some congresswoman was horrified to see. She looked up, and there was a drone outside her bathroom window.
Oh my God.
That would be pretty horrifying.
It's true. No, it happened.
If it was my bathroom window, the person watching would be horrified.
And thanks again, as always, to Kevin Marks. You're rivaled now by Keith and his Bitcoin discussion for impenetrable information in a British accent.
I can work on that. I can be more impenetrable about Bitcoin.
And I was with John Borthwick yesterday.
Start talking crypto.
I was with John Borthwick in New York yesterday, and he was talking about getting Benedict Evans to come on the show. I've talked to Benedict, and he's glad to join an episode. But it then occurred to me that it would be 4 Brits and me. So
that could be the title of a Hollywood movie.
Yeah. No, 4 Brits and a baby. I'm the baby.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thanks to the chat room, as always. Thanks to everybody. We've had a tough week. A dear friend from my brothers and my childhood passed away a couple of days ago, and she was kind of my second mom. In some cases, she was kind of like my first mom, actually. And because she was there while my mother was running around Europe with Costa Gavras and the New Wave. So it leads you to, obviously, these kinds of things are rites of passage, but there's something really I wouldn't call it exciting, substantial in the world these days. It's probably always been there, but I'm feeling it more and more, and that's just having the patience to wait and work for something substantive in our lives. And this show is part of that, and I appreciate you guys sharing this experiment, because it can only do good. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who did, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.